Hey, what is going on everyone? Welcome to another project. In today's project, we're going to create this little extremely simple task manager that is going to accept tasks from us. We're going to be able to complete those tasks and we're going to have a lot of fun. So we're going to use HTML, CSS and JavaScript, so no framework is required. We're just going to create something extremely simple that you could use day to day. So for example, let's say I'm going to create video, then edit video, upload video, and then subscribe, and then I can complete this one, complete this one, complete this one, and this one you need to complete on your own, because if you like this video, then please give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this. We're posting videos on a weekly basis, so come on, take a chance, become a member. Alright, so let's just get started with our project here. I'm going to drag this to the right side. I'm going to create, I just have code editor in a blank in an empty folder opened. As always, it's code. And by the way, you can find the entire code down in the description below or on my blog. Well, actually the link down in the description below will lead you to my blog, and you can find there each of my videos and code bases. So let's go ahead and create here 3 files. One is going to be the index.html file. And what, let's also populate this. So I'm going to shift exclamation mark, create a boilerplate. We're going to call this task and manager app. Let's also include before the title of CSS file by using a link tag, and as an href will be the style.css file that we need to create, but we're going to do this later on. Actually, we're going to create the entire HTML, the entire JavaScript, and then we're going to style this, okay? Now let's go down to the body, and as a very first thing, we're going to create the script tag and link up to this the app.js. The app.js will be the JavaScript file, so let's go ahead and create it. Or we're going to create it when we're actually typing the JavaScript. So let's just leave it for a later date. Now, next up in the body tag, I'm going to create a main tag with a class of container. So dot container. In the main tag, I'm going to create a header. Header tag is going to include an h1 with the title of task and manager and app. And underneath our header, we're going to create a simple div that is going to house then the form. We don't need any kind of action for the form, but what we do need is a ID of task dash form. Now let's go into the form, and we're going to create an input tag and a button. Now the button is just optional because when you hit enter, you're actually submitting the form and the submit action. So we're not going to add on the event listener on the button, but we're actually going to, upon submission of the form, add a new task. So let's create both of them. We're going to create an input tag. You can leave it as text. You can leave it also as blank because the default behavior of any input tag is text. And let's also give this the ID of task dash and input. And next we're going to, you can also add a placeholder if you wish. So let's add a placeholder. We're going to call this enter, just as you see it in a finished project, a task ... And you know what? Now we can actually right click and open with live server, and this is our current project. Perfect. Now still remaining within the form, we're going to create a button. I'm going to add to this the text of add task. There we go. And also the button will have a type of submit. Now when you add the type of submit to the button, it is now able to submit the form. If you just leave it blank or leave it as button, you can also change it to button, it will not submit the form. So in order to have the button, the possibility to submit the form, you need to add to it the type of submit. Now let's move outside the form and create here an unordered list with the ID of task dash list. Obviously this is where our tasks will live. So I'm going to just create one task. I'm going to create an li with task dash one. You know what? Let's create 3 more. So let's copy this, change the next one. We are going to add them dynamically later on, but I just want to have a bit of text here, a bit of content here. Okay, that's it for the HTML. You could almost close it up, but I would suggest that you leave it open so we can reference back to it. And now let's create the app.js file. Within here, we're going to grab onto 2 elements from the DOM. That is the task form and the task list. So task form, as I said, we're going to grab onto the form and not to the submit button, and the task list. Now you could either just copy both of them. I'm going to copy this one here and pack it into quotation marks, pack it into parentheses, and go ahead and create a const. Call this task. What am I doing? Sorry, I wanted to grab onto the form. So once again, task form, so task, const task, and form will be the name of this variable. We're going to assign it to the document and dot. Now you could either use query selector or use get element by ID. I'm going to use the get element by ID this time. Now I'm going to copy this, replace the form with a list, and also replace this little title right here with list. And now I should have access to both of the elements. You can always check them by console logging both of them. I'm going to pass in this one, comma, pass in the task, also pass in the task list. And now I should see here, if I inspect my page in the console, wait a second, it should be down here. Excellent. And now the console, I should see both of the elements. So I have my form and I have my list. Perfect. So let's close up our console. Let's move back to the JavaScript file. Let's comment this out. I'm going to still leave it in there. So first things first, I'm going to grab onto the task form. So task form, and I'm going to add to this the event listener, add event listener of submit. Now, for those of you who have my 30 HTML, CSS, and JavaScript course, this project right here, which contains 30 projects using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, will also be there earlier than on YouTube as always, and it will be a much updated version and with also refactoring added to it. So for those of you who have my course, you already see this example, but a different version of this example. You should see it in the projects, added as a new project. As I promised you, I am adding new projects to the course as time moves on. Okay, so let's move on. Let's add a task form, add event listener, submit, and we're going to use here a function. This function we're going to take in an event, and then we're going to pass down the event. And first things first, we're going to grab onto the event and prevent the default behavior of the form, which is to submit itself. So we're going to use here the prevent default property on the event. So in this way, when we're going to submit a form, it's not going to refresh the page, but it's going to grab the elements that we're submitting and do something with them. Now, what elements do we need? Well, we need our little input here, this task input. So let's create here another const, and let's call this task and input. Now, let's go ahead, grab onto it from the DOM, so get element by ID, and let's do a task dash input, or we could just actually paste it in because I did have it in my copy. Now we're going to grab onto the value from whatever we're entering in here. So and we're going to add it to another variable. So let's create here another const. We're going to call it task and text, because what we're inputting at the end of the day is a text. So let's go ahead, select .task input, and we're going to use the .value method on it. And I'm going to go one step further and use also the trim method on it. Now, why am I doing this? Well, because the trim method will remove any kind of white space from both ends, so from the beginning and the end of the string, and will return a new string. So without modifying the original string that I'm entering. So if I would do here space, 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 so for instance, it's just going to give it without a white space. So we just grabbed onto the content. Let's also verify. So console log, let's verify the text content. So if I also open up the console, I should see here console and add something in here, hit enter. I should see whatever I entered in there. Now, for example, if I enter here Norbert, I should see Norbert. Okay. So also if I add here a space, hit enter, you have to see it's going to console Norbert. Let me just show you something else. Space, 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 and mama. Hit enter, and you're not going to see any kind of space in here. Only if I would add a mama and papa here, only then you will see the white space. But at the front and at the end, you will not see any kind of white space. Okay, now let's do here a refresh. Also close up the console, and let me just comment out this part. Now we need some kind of conditioning when we're adding a new task here, and one condition would be that this should not submit itself if it is empty. So the first condition, or the only condition that we need, is if the task text is not equal to an empty string, only then will the form submit the information. Now the information that we're submitting will be added somewhere, and that is a newly created element. So we're going to create here, let's type in a comment, create a new task item. Let's call it item. And the way we create a new task item is, first of all, we're going to create an element. So we're going to create a variable, going to call it task item, and we're going to assign to it using the document and then create element method, and I'm going to create a li, an list item. To this list item, we can now add a class by using task item dot class list and dot add, and now we can give it a name. We're going to give this the name of task and item. And after we're done with it, we need to append it or add it somewhere, this list item, and we're going to add it to the task lists. Okay, each list item will be then added to this task list. So let's go down to the task and list, and we're going to use the append child method. And now it's going to ask us, what do we wish to append? Well, we want to append this task item that we just created to the task list. Okay, so let's try this out. I'm going to add task number 4, and let's hit enter. And task number 4 was added, but we can't see anything. Well, this is because we didn't add the text itself to it. So let's go up here. Let's say task text is dot. We're going to use the dot context text content method on it, and we're going to assign this to the task text. Okay, so let's try this out again. Task number 4. Oh, whoops, I used here text. It should be task item. Okay, so task number 4, and there we go. There's a task number 4. Now, this is pretty nifty, but I don't want to add the numbers here, the orders of the tasks. I want to add them automatically to the front. So you will say this is number 1 and so forth and so on, but that's not the way I want to do it. I want to be able to grab onto the indexes of each element that I'm adding in here and use it as a number. Now, because arrays start with the index of 0 and don't want to have task 0, well, we can create multiple or use multiple tricks here. For example, I would subtract 1 from them, but I'm going to do something else. I'm going to go up here and going to type in a counter variable to track the tasks. Basically, I'm going to create index. I'm going to create for me a variable. I'm going to call this let and task index, and I'm going to start it with 1. So I'm going to assign it to the value of 1. Now down here, when we are adding a task text, I'm going to wrap this first of all into parentheses, then $, meaning that this is a variable, and then I'm going to add it to a template string or a template array by using backticks. Now this is going to yield the same result, but what I want to add here is also $, open close curly brackets, and I also want to add here the task index. Okay, then a space, and you could either use here, for example, you can use a dash, so you can see that there's a differentiator between them. And now if we try to add it, task, then you can see 1. If I try to add another task, it's still going to be 1, so we need to increment this. So right after we created let's also type in here comment, append the task item to the task list, and append ND. Next, we're going to move down here and say that we want to increment, so increment the task index. And we're going to just take the task index and ++, which will mean increment. And because you saw here that each time I'm adding this, going to remain in here, the text is remaining in here, we're going to also take the input, the task input, and I'm going to clear its value by reassigning the value to a empty string, so to absolutely nothing. So each time we're submitting, it's rerunning this entire functionality. So if I would do here now a task, and it should be no, actually let's say create video, this would be 1. You know what, I'm also going to comment everything out from our HTML here. So let's move back here, let's say create video, this will be 1. I want to add a space here. Let's see, with a space, maybe that's more clear. Create video, edit video, and upload video. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we're pretty much done with our application here. One last thing that we need to do is to style it. Now, by styling it, we will also add the possibility to complete tasks. So what I'm going to do here is, before our append child, you're going to grab onto the task item, and add an event listener to it. So each time we're creating a test item, we're going to add an event listener. It's going to listen for a click, and then a function will be triggered. Each time we click on this, I'm going to use the this keyword that is going to specifically only watch for that element, and then it's going to take its class list, and by using the toggle method, we're going to toggle the class of completed. Now, because we don't have the class yet, I'm just going to console log here the string of completed. Okay, so let's try this out. Task, enter, open up the console, right click, inspect, console, and now if I click on this, it should give me completed. Okay, perfect. Now let's move on to styling. So let's create another file. Let's call it style.css. Also, let's link it up. We already have it linked up. So please check if it is linked up in your HTML file. Let's go back to CSS. And first things first, we're going to do a general reset. So star, open and close parentheses, curly brackets, then set the margin to 0. Let's also reset the paddings. So padding 0. And we're also going to line effects using box size and border box. And one last thing, I want to take out those little dots there. In our list items, we're going to use list style and none. Now remaining within our reset, I'm also going to reset the entire font, the font family to, let's say, Lucia Sans. There we go. Okay, now let's grab onto the body tag and we want to add some background color to it. So let's use a background color. I'm going to use the background color, the hexadecimal number of 6799AB. Okay, that's just light blue color. Also, let's add the all-around padding now to the element. So padding of 20 pixels. Next up, let's style our H1. Let's grab onto the H1 and I'm just going to add a margin to the bottom of 2 rem. So it's going to push everything down a bit. Next, we're going to grab onto the input tags, comma, the button, because I'm going to style both of them. And I'm going to use here the outline, assign it to none. We're going to take out the borders by typing in border and none. Then we're going to change the font family to inherit. Now let's add a bit of padding 10 pixels top and bottom and 20 pixels left and right. Let's trim those borders by adding a border radius of 5 pixels all around. Let's change the background color to a hash F1, F1, F1. Let's increase the font weight to a pretty bolder one using font weight of 600. Also, when we're hovering over our elements, let's change the cursor to pointer. So each time I'm going to go over the element, cursor will be changed into pointer, signifying that I could do something with that element. Now let's add a transition all of 0.9 seconds and ease, and a margin to the bottom of both elements of 1 rem. And there we go. Also, let's add a hover effect each time I'm hovering over either the input or the button. And this is a pretty cool new possibility of adding hover effect. We can use the parent selector. If you didn't notice, it is now supported to use parent selectors, to use nesting actually in CSS. So let's use hover. Although you're going to see these squiggly lines, don't worry, it's actually working. And let's do a background color of hash E1, E1, E1. Now if I would hover over them, actually let me change this to something more dark gray. You can see the color changing. Okay, now this is exactly the same as typing in input, hover, and button hover. Just use the parent element, and this will apply to both of them, as you can see. All right, now let's move on to the class of container. We're going to add a max width of 1200 pixels. Actually, you know what? I'm going to reduce this to 900. I like it more in 900, so it won't leave 900 pixels. Also, let's center everything by using margin 0 and left and right auto. After our container, we're going to take care of our task item. So let's grab into the task item class dash item, and each item should have a max width of 260 pixels, a height of 25 pixels. Let's add a margin to top and bottom of 5 pixels and left and right 0. So let's add here a task. Let's do first of all a refresh. Let's add here task and let's hit enter. And I don't have a background color, so let's add a background color first of all. Background color of, let's add a white color. Hash FFF should be a complete white color. If I add another task, then this should be number 2. Okay, and we also have a bit of space between them. Let's give this a border radius of 10 pixels. Well, you know what? Let's remain with those 5 pixels. 5 pixels. Let's add a box shadow of 0, 2 for spread, 4 for the laterals pad, and let's add a RGB color of 0, 0, 0 and 0.2 to give us a bit of a shadow. Also, when we're hovering over the elements, I want to change the cursor to pointer, add some padding to the left side. So padding left of 10 pixels. Let's also set a padding to the top of 5 pixels. You know what, let's do a 3. There we go. Now when a new task is added, I want to use some sort of animation. For now, it's pretty boring task key, just going to appear there. So what I'm going to do here is create an add keyframe. I'm going to call this animate and in. Now this one will go from 0% with a opacity of 0, and on the x-axis we're going to use a transform, because we're going to send it and translate on the x-axis. We're going to send it from -100 pixels and now bring it back when it's at 100%. So I'm just going to copy this, paste it down here, type in 10, opacity 1, and this can now be 0. This will be its initial position. Now let's add another task. So task, and well, I forgot to include here the animation. So animate, use the name of animate in, because that's the animation that we just created. Now the time, well, you can do it fast or slow. I'm going to use 0.3 seconds and ease. I'm going to use the same speed as I used here for the transitions. Okay, now let's add another task. Task and enter. And I messed something up. Animate in. And this should be S. Yep. Let's add another task. And there we go. Each task will be now added using a little animation. Now let's add a completed effect to it. So we created a class using JavaScript of completed. Each time we click on an element, the class of completed will be added. Now, if the element is completed, then the text decoration should be line through, and the background color of that element should transform then into chartreuse. And now let's check it out. Let's say the first task is completed. Let's click it, and you can see there's going to be line through and green. Now you could remove the line through if you don't like it. Let's just leave it green. Now if you haven't completed the task, you can click again on it and it's going to take out that green effect. But if you complete it, then just click on it and it's going to assign each task the value of completed. And the very last task that we're going to add here is, of course, to like and subscribe, of course. So this one you need to complete on your own. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Norbert BM. If you want to support the channel, then please like and subscribe to it. Also, if you want to support me and learn web development, then check out my courses. They're down in the description below on my webpage, where you can find blog posts, tutorials, and of course, web development courses. So, thank you very much. Catch you next time. Bye-bye.